All right, let's jump right into this explainer and investigate a truly fascinating mystery. We're looking at why human brains pretty much universally invent the exact same terrifying creatures. Seriously, whether you're reading ancient texts or digging through archaeological sites, there is this common thread of monsters woven through human history that is just impossible to ignore.
And it brings us to a massive question. Why do all ancient cultures have monsters? It's kind of incredible when you think about it. I mean, from the warm, sunny coasts of ancient Greece all the way up to the freezing fjords of Scandinavia, entirely unconnected civilizations were dreaming up remarkably similar and utterly terrifying beasts to haunt their local stories.
See, before modern science gave us the tools to actually understand our environment, we worldwide basically created an entire catalog of the supernatural. We're talking mermaids and sea monsters, Bigfoot-style hairy giants lurking in the woods, gods who controlled the totally unpredictable weather, and literal demons to explain the tragedy of illness and madness. People desperately needed a way to explain the unknown, right? So their imaginations just filled in the blanks.
So today, we're putting on our psychological detective hats. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the universal monster mystery, move into terrors of the ancient world, then look at fossils, squids, and mistakes, explore the pattern-seeking brain, and finally wrap up with allegories and societal symbols.
Okay, Section 1, Terrors of the Ancient World, looking specifically at the monsters of Greece and Scandinavia. Let's kick things off by just taking in the sheer scale of the horrifying lore our ancestors were creating.
Just notice the sheer specificity of the terror here. Over in ancient Greece, Homer described the chimera, and this wasn't just, a big scary bear. It was this unstoppable, fire-breathing hybrid born straight out of primordial chaos. It had the front of a lion, the back of a serpent, and the middle of a goat, and it was literally belching blazing fire. It was the ultimate monstrous mashup, a total bane to humanity that required a divine hero riding a winged horse just to take it down.
Meanwhile, way up in Scandinavia, the Vikings feared something a lot closer to home, the Draugr. Now, these weren't your typical floaty, see-through ghosts. No, the Draugr were corporeal, physically rotting zombies. They possessed immense superhuman strength and brought with them this overpowering, absolutely horrifying stench of decay. These were undead nightmares that local heroes actually had to physically hack to pieces just to restore some peace and quiet to their communities.
The Norse even organized all this mythological chaos into a literal timeline of doom. They called it Ragnarok. Just look at this sequence. First, these giant skywolves, Skoll and Hati, finally catch and devour the sun and the moon. Then, the monstrous wolf Fenrir breaks out of his magical chains. Next, Thor has this epic battle with the colossal Midgard serpent Jormungandr, who literally encircles the world. And finally, the entire cosmos just collapses into darkness. For them, monsters weren't just bad guys in a story. They were the literal mechanism for the end of the world.
Moving on to Section 2, Fossils, Squids, and Mistakes, the physical clues behind the myths. So, how on earth did humanity actually dream up such epic, oddly specific terrors?
Well, part of it is just simple biology mixed with, mistaken identity. Take the myth of the ship-sinking kraken or leviathan and compare it to reality. Out in the actual ocean, giant squids can grow up to 13 meters long, and they literally get into deep-sea brawls with sperm whales. I mean, just imagine an ancient sailor catching a terrifying split-second glimpse of a massive thrashing tentacle at the surface. It is so easy to see how that guy runs back to port absolutely convinced that a monster capable of swallowing ship's whole is lurking out there. And nature itself kind of played tricks on our ancestors too. Think about it. If you're an ancient traveler wandering through a valley and you stumble upon an elephant skull, but the tusks have rotted away, what do you see? You see this massive, humanoid-looking skull with one giant hole right in the center of the forehead where the trunk used to be. Boom, you've just discovered the Cyclops. Same thing goes for dragons. Ancient civilizations were digging up these massive, unexplainable dinosaur bones and logically concluded, yep, giant reptilian monsters definitely used to roam the earth.
Actually, even that fantastical chimera we talked about has roots in physical reality. The original myth places the chimera in Lythia, which is in modern-day Turkey. Well, wouldn't you know it, in that exact area today, hikers can visit Yanartaş. It's this hillside full of permanent underground methane gas vents that naturally spew eternal flames right out of the rock. Back in the day, these fiery vents were massive landmarks used by sailors for navigation. A whole mountain that breathes eternal fire?
Yeah, that easily evolves into a story about a fire-breathing monster. Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, the pattern-seeking brain and why we invent the supernatural. Because beyond physical mistakes and misunderstood fossils, the real culprit is the hardware running inside our own heads.
We survived as a species because we're incredibly good at learning cause and effect. We figured out that planting a seed brings food and touching fire burns you. But this amazing survival trait comes with a really strange side effect. People are, by nature, pattern seekers, which means we see false patterns too, and we desperately want to see a trend or some sort of agency even where there isn't any. Basically, our brains are deeply, deeply uncomfortable with randomness. If a disaster happens, we want a reason for it, even if it's completely random.
And you can watch how this snowballs into what we can call the pattern-seeking loop. Step 1, disaster strikes. Say, crops fail from a drought or a ship goes down in a storm. Step 2, ancient humans grow incredibly desperate to find a reason why it happened, so they can stop it from happening again. Step 3, since they don't understand meteorology or ocean currents, they invent an angry god or a sea monster to blame it on. And then Step 4, and this is the absolutely crucial part, they make a sacrifice. Inventing the monster and sacrificing to it gives them a psychological sense of control over a totally unpredictable, terrifying world.
Tragically, sometimes nature actively played along with this psychological loop. Down in ancient Peru, civilizations would perform ritual human sacrifices to appease their gods and fix their environmental disasters. And because the El Niño weather cycle in South America happens to be surprisingly regular, the weather would inevitably improve shortly after they made their sacrifices. This terrible, terrible coincidence firmly convinced them that their invented monsters were totally real and that their rituals were actually controlling the weather.
Let's move into our final section, allegories and societal symbols, looking at monsters as mirrors of morality. Religious studies scholars view these creatures not just as cognitive mistakes, but as crucial sociological tools.
See, back in the Middle Ages, bestiaries weren't really biological textbooks, they were moral lessons. The beasts had profound symbolic power. Unicorns weren't just fast horses with horns on their heads. They represented innocence, purity, and humility. Dragons weren't just a physical threat. They denoted sin, the devil, and overwhelming temptation. In Norse myth, you have the dragon Nidahug gnawing at the roots of the world tree. That's a symbol for deep moral decay. And demons? By saying demons haunted ritually unclean places like latrines and graveyards, these cultures were personifying the abstract idea that those areas were dangerous to public health. The big takeaway here is that these monsters served a distinct function for the people who invented them. That Norse wolf Fenrir, he was a stand-in for uncontainable forces of destruction that a society constantly has to guard against. The Midgard serpent represented the terrifying boundaries separating the safe, known human world from the vast, chaotic unknown. And the Greek chimera wasn't just a beast to stab with a sword, it was the embodiment of chaos. The prophecies even warned that it required a community to find internal harmony in order to prevent the destruction the chimera represented.
So ultimately, what we've discovered throughout this explainer is that monsters are way, way more than just fairy tales meant to scare children. They're a profound byproduct of human evolution. They're this breathtaking blend of misunderstood fossils, our desperate psychological need to find patterns, and the deep societal necessity to establish moral order in a super dangerous universe. Really, they're a mirror reflecting our own minds.
And that leaves us with a pretty wild question to ponder. If our ancient ancestors invented all these epic, terrifying monsters to cope with the unknown forces of their time, what modern monsters are we creating today to explain the things we still don't understand? Think about that the next time you watch a sci-fi movie or scroll past the latest internet conspiracy. Thanks for exploring this mystery with me.